the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Week who it comes out a report of like it's likely that the Hawks either trade Dejounte Murray or Trae Young. Both have been linked. You talked about Trae Young and the Lakers link. Dejounte Murray at the deadline was something that was like, oh, is he going to get moved? Is that a Laker at the deadline type deal? Does your gut just kind of in your reporting and what reading the tea leaves, does it feel like to you the Lakers and the Hawks end up being trade partners this summer, whether that's Dejounte or Trae? Does it feel like one or the other is likely Los Angeles bound?
So my default stance with these types of scenarios are they're always more likely than not to not happen, right? Just because, I mean, like Dame basically was telegraphing he wanted to go to Miami. And I know part of that was some bad blood in that situation for various reasons. But like, I mean, like if there was ever a superstar trade that was like bound to happen on paper, it was Dame having all that goodwill in Portland, wanting to go to Miami theoretically having at least a competitive package, and that sort of being a shoo-in in terms of just that deal happening. And the fact that it didn't, like that to me kind of speaks to, I think teams are starting to take back some of the power from stars and not acquiesce to them as much as they were in recent seasons. So like, I think that could potentially set a precedent of not necessarily bending the knee to the player and just giving them what they want. Because if anyone deserved to get that, it was Dame Lillard after the stretch that he had in Portland and just being a franchise icon and, basically, just being as great of an ambassador as you can be for an organization. And not asking out, I think he could have asked out several years earlier and probably should have for the benefit of his career, but he chose not to. He tried to make it work and ultimately, eventually got to the point where it was best to move on. So looking at but to get to, the Hawks and Trae, like I think looking at Dejounte and Trae, like Trae just, in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion, like has greater trade value. I know the team obviously has played better with Dejounte in this stretch, and he started to rediscover the groove that he had in San Antonio as their go-to guy before he got traded to Atlanta. But in terms of just like, I mean, you have a level of star power with Trae, you have the name, you have the pedigree of the Eastern Conference Finals run, and the clutch shots and like all the branding and the like all the stuff that kind of goes with being a star. Like I think Trae checks a lot of those boxes, and he's just going to command a greater return. So if I'm Atlanta, if I value them similarly or maybe at least close enough where it's not like it's that big of a drop off if you trade one versus the other, I trade the guy who has more trade value. Now there's the matter of what they can get, and the Lakers can offer 3 first-round picks. They could throw in Austin Reeves, though I think they would fight to keep him, although maybe Trae's such a star that's one of the deals they're willing to give up Austin. But Rui Hachimura probably has to be in that deal to make the math work. They have second-round picks they can trade. In terms of young talent, not a lot of enticing young guys. But I think the Lakers would certainly be in the mix. There's the clutch connection. Trae has been to Laker games as a bystander in the crowd before, went last year during the playoffs. So I think that there's been some breadcrumbs certainly between the two sides. And from what I've heard in terms of Laker trade targets this summer, it's been Trae Young, Kyrie Irving, and Donovan Mitchell. Those are the 3 names that you hear in some form or fashion in talking to people around both the team and just talking to people around the league. Like those are the 3 guys that potentially probably the 3 biggest names that could potentially be available this summer. Now we'll see. Like there's always a team that underachieves. There's always a star that becomes disgruntled. So there will likely be another star that emerges that we don't foresee. And maybe the Lakers can get involved in there as well. But like I look at Trae, San Antonio would be really interesting with Victor Wembanyama. Like that would be theoretically like a perfect partnership in terms of just like, and I don't know if you're advancing the kind of the timeline with Victor, although he looks to me like a top 20 guy already, which is kind of insane. But in terms of like the guy you would want, like an elite pick and roll partner, although I don't think you want to make Victor just a roller. And that's kind of the concern there, is like Victor can do more than just set screens and be like a Rudy Gobert offensively. But then defensively, you want Victor Wembanyama flanking Trae Young and kind of hiding his weaknesses. And like that's like the ultimate guy you could basically put on the back line there. So I look at those two teams as probably like the two teams that would make the most sense potentially for Trae. I know people have mentioned Minnesota and like this theoretical cat for Trae. And I think Atlanta would actually have to throw in more from a financial perspective just to make the trade work. But like, I don't know, are there any other teams that you kind of think of when you think of Trae in the trade market?
It's interesting. The thing about the Spurs is like the Spurs are going to finish, I think, worse in the West again, right?
Yeah.
Something I've said to people where they talk about, like, we were on the like our NBA show that we do weekly with Corbin, Chris, and Kenny, is like one of the things that I've posited that I think it's going to take NBA fans like our ilk, like the millennial NBA fans and analysts and writers that grew up with the Spurs being the world-class organization for 20 years and just being able to pivot from David Robinson to Tim Duncan to Kawhi Leonard, like that seamless transition. But like there's been so much brain drain. Pop's future, I think, is still year to year. I think they're one of the worst organizations in the NBA right now. I think what they got for Kawhi was just a horrific package that set them back further. They've operated in a way like the Dejounte stuff was weird. They went into this year not giving Victor Wembanyama any point guard help at all. They were just like, figure it out, and then we'll maybe get Trae Jones in here. I think one of the weird things about the Spurs and the way that the way I see them is I just don't think they're well run anymore. I think that those days are long gone. I think they've been passed, and it's part of it. It kind of reminds me of the Patriots in a way. Post Tom Brady, I just think it kind of caught up to him, where Bill Belichick's drafts were really bad and were getting worse, and he was trying to do too much, and that whole doing GM coach Bill, like it didn't work after a certain point. Now the Patriots are one of the worst teams in the NFL, and it just happens quickly, where like it doesn't disqualify those years, and it doesn't mean those years didn't matter and that you weren't that point. But I think the Thunder are now what the Spurs were. Like the Thunder have built that, where they're transitioning, where they're going to pull off 6 straight like multi-time all-stars in a decade and a half with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Jalen Williams now, SGA now, and Chet Holmgren. Like that's almost unheard of. Like that, to get that, like it's not even really luck, because Sam Presti deserves credit for building this and sticking to his plan. But like they just kind of feel like the new Spurs to me. And I think that they're going to be in that 50 to 60 win window for years. They've built their new core. They have made that pivot. I don't think the Spurs are going to get out of the gutter. I don't think this goes well with Victor in San Antonio. I don't think they're going to make the right things to make this all work. I mean,
well,
I think people just see
a quick counter.
Yeah.
I think you could argue that trading for Trae Young would go in with not being a well-run organization.
I would agree.
Not be a smart decision. So
I would agree.
That almost would, I think, even kind of prove your point of
yes.
I still have, I mean, you're closer to the situation being in Atlanta and following that team more closely, but I still have my reservations about Trae Young at the highest levels. And just like I know his defense has gotten slightly better, but he's still a massive liability on that end. And I think some of the inefficiency stuff from a shooting perspective, like, and just being so heliocentric, and they're, in my opinion, being a little like, and just kind of the limitations of being a small guard. And there's a reason why we can count on one hand the guys that have really led a championship team as a under 6'4" guard, with Steph Curry and Isaiah Thomas. And like, even Tony Parker had Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, he had Pop. Like I wouldn't even put him as like that. But so like I just look at it, and sure, if he's on the Lakers, he's their third best player, so that probably properly slots him a little better. But I think like if Trae's getting traded, he probably has to accept a role shift in a way that he is not used to, in terms of like giving the ball up way more than he's accustomed to. And it's unclear if he can make that adjustment. And again, I just think so. Like looking at it from that perspective, I think the Lakers make a little bit more sense, just because they have enough. Like they have a couple of guys that he would have to fall in line under. but he could also go into San Antonio and be like, I'm better than Victor. And like, this is my team. I'm going to run the show. And like, so that's where I'm with you. Like, I don't know. It's probably not the right move in general, but I could also see San Antonio like overcorrecting because I think they've gotten a lot of criticism this year, and deservedly so, for how bad of a roster they've put around.
They lucked into Victor. Like, if
And
Victor isn't just falling in their lap and they don't get lottery luck, like, we are talking about them as one of the worst run organizations, but they stumbled into Victor, and it's just, he's so generational that I think it's just clouding what's been happening for years. That has been kind of plain to see with what is happening in San Antonio. I would bet against it. And it's not against Victor. Victor is unbelievable. I would just bet against. So it's like when people are talking about Chet or Victor, I'm like, I mean, I'm going to bet on Chet every single time for their careers. Like, I think Chet's in just an unbelievable situation, and Chet's been really, really good in Oklahoma City and been better than I thought he was going to be in the NBA. For Trae, though, I just feel like the Lakers make a lot of sense because, like, also when you look at, I mean, you would know better than I, but like, this is it. Like, you're year to year, like, what do you have to lose? Like, for Trae to bring in somebody like Trae and that mercurial factor, I think you're like, why not? And then if LeBron retires, we can try Trae and AD for a year or two and see what that looks like. I mean, that's still a lot of star power. That's still going to be fun. It's not a championship team or anything, but you never know. Like, you just bring in Trae to see if that's enough. If you can't get Kyrie, if you can't get Donovan Mitchell, whatever, I think that's a worthy final gamble for the Lakers. Like, what were you doing anyway? You were throwing out D'Angelo Russell. You were throwing out you signed Gabe Vincent, who hasn't been available all year long. Like, what do you have to lose? So I look at it in terms of the Lakers aspect and where LeBron's at in his career. I don't know what you have to lose if you're Los Angeles to go up to real pieces, because I think there are some folks where it's like that last pick, where that last first round pick that was so talked about. I'm like, when LeBron retires and when AD's wheels fall, it's going to be bad. Like, there's no way around it. Like, what, like, just, you might as well just rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I just feel like the Lakers are headed towards some troublesome times once they're all gone, whether they want to admit it or not. So you might as well just go all the way out and add one more star, whether that's Trae, Dejounte, whoever, and see what happens. So I think if you're a fan, you're like, hey, we tried, we did everything we could for those final years, and then LeBron retired, and then we saw it just like, it is what it is. Like, we got a title out of it. We went down swinging, and that's it. But I don't see there being any other way this ends for LeBron and AD in Los Angeles other than it's going to get ugly and it's going to be rough. So you might as well try and win one more ring and take a big swing on somebody like Trae, who could swing a playoff series. And I don't think anybody in the West would want to deal with Trae, LeBron, and AD all at full health in a 7-game series.
Yeah, and I also think based on the argument I was making for pairing Trae with Victor, you can make a similar argument for Trae with AD, where AD is going to cover for him defensively. AD has become a bit more of a pick and roll big nowadays, and just the threat of him as both a roller and a popper in the mid range area, like that would be a perfect fit next to Trae as really the best I think pick and roll partner he's had. When I know Capella's elite at that role, but like, AD's obviously just at a different level as a scorer and as an offensive threat. So like, I don't know how you really guard a Trae AD pick and roll. So yeah, I mean, that's where I look at him being part of the bridging the next era of Lakers basketball, where if LeBron only plays 2 more years, 3 more years, whatever it ends up being, then you can build around, like, AD, I think, will be 33, 34 around then. Trae will be late 20s, and that theoretically, if you can get the right pieces, can at least be a pretty competitive team, if not a contender.
About where you are right now.
Yeah, and so I think it makes sense. Like, not to get too in the weeds. Like, I think for the Lakers, if there was a way to get, because I think they do need better wings. Like that's been probably the biggest weakness of this team overall. Like, I look at Mikal Bridges as someone that would really help them. Though the asking price I've heard is insane. Yeah. So I don't know how realistic that is, but like someone on kind of like that, almost in between, if you could keep like D'Angelo or Austin and then move one of them along with someone else and bring in, and then obviously the picks.
Well, I don't think D'Lo would be going to Atlanta in any of these scenarios. I don't.
Yeah, I think, and he's got a player option. He'll probably opt out and either re-sign with a team or sign elsewhere. So, there's a lot of moving parts with the situation, but I think if Trae Young is available, which it looks like he's going to be, the Lakers will certainly be in the mix and be, in my opinion, one of the front runners.
Interesting. More likely to make the Western Conference Finals, Jovan, because I don't think they both do. And now that Oklahoma City's fallen down to the 3 seed and Denver's moved up to this 2, it makes it a little bit more interesting. But when you look at Oklahoma City and Minnesota, I think one end up making it because I think people are going to talk themselves out of both because they're both fresh and both new to this kind of playoff atmosphere and these kind of expectations that you kind of have to go through it a little bit.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.